the score. Every day you're blessing me, each day I love you more.
In the West, there are still a few good men left, men of God, like the circuit-riding preachers of old, proclaiming truth like the holy prophets of old, strong and bold. You're about to hear politically incorrect but biblically correct truth from circuit-riding preacher Peter Peters, whose home base is a radio ranch nestled in the Laramie River Valley near Laramie, Wyoming. The radio ranch is a working cattle and horse ranch where circuit-riding preacher Peter Peters broadcasts nightly worldwide on the Scriptures for America Worldwide Broadcasting Network, reaching the world through satellite, radio, television, shortwave, and the World Wide Web. Writing for the brand, he preaches for the man, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. His circuit not only includes a radio ranch outreach in Wyoming, but also the LaPorte Church of Christ, located at the base of the colorful Colorado Rocky Mountains in LaPorte, Colorado, where he has preached for over 30 years. The message is preached there by Dr. Peters on Sunday morning or streamed live on the internet and are archived at the ministry website, scripturesforamerica.org. Dr. Peters' politically incorrect but biblically correct sermons are available on CD and DVD. Many in America, Canada, and all over the world are on the free CD and DVD ministry. Our address will be given at the end of this broadcast. And now, here is Dr. and Pastor Peter John Peters with the Word of God.
What I want to do before I get into the message this morning is actually give a preface to the message. And that preface is to let you know that every now and then I like to bring to my radio audience a message that I bring from the pulpit. You must understand that it's a dilemma at times, preaching to those that can chew and digest meat, and then trying to feed those out there on the radio ministry. They can barely digest pablum sometimes. And I know there are times that we feel like, well, what good does it do? Someone pointed out to me the prophets of old didn't necessarily always have what you would call a great success rate. But really they were successful as long as they did what they were supposed to do. One of those things being that they were to tell Israel to repent and bring forth to Israel their sins. And so the message that I'm going to bring this morning will be played, at least the first portion of it, on our radio broadcast. And I've just felt burdened to bring it because I see this happening in our land, the subject I'm going to talk about. There are a couple illustrations and some points that you've heard from this pulpit before, so you just have to bear with me because you'll get a repeat. But this message, Lord willing, will go across the airwaves, and I think it's needed. This message follows on the heels of a presidential campaign and election in which the term values was used a lot. Anybody hear the campaigners talking about values? Almost comical at times, isn't it? It's almost as comical as when they had Senator Kennedy on the ethics committee. Was that it? Well, we got to still laugh in this land, don't we? But it seems that the voters were not all that concerned about values, really. It seems that they were more concerned about things such as economics, things that pertain to their pocketbook and their prosperity and their security and social tranquility. They were interested in that, not understanding that it's a law of Almighty God that you cannot have that when you reject His values and His morals. How foolish we are in America to think that we can elect someone to a position and that will help us achieve the very things that the Scriptures say can only be achieved through obedience to God's laws, statutes, and judgments. How foolish of us to think that we can stand as a nation, and this is what we're doing today. We stand as a nation with our right hand extended and the middle index finger sticking straight out, and we're waving it before God, and we're flipping him off, and we're saying, I defy you, God. You say, what kind of a preacher are you to talk that way? You know perfectly well all the filth and the garbage that we allow into our homes today through this Talmudic thing called a television set, that you are a hypocrite if you condemn a preacher for using an illustration like that. And that's about as appropriate illustration as I can think of when I see that we have a lot of men come over us as supposedly men of position and authority who have values totally contrary to the Word of God. I'm going to talk in this message about a thing that I read in the Newsweek magazine of November 2nd, 1992, about this. Here's a picture of a little picture of a face here in the front of a face of a fornicating slut named Madonna. And I'm going to repeat that so on the airways they can record it. Record it. I'm going to say it again, then send it to Madonna's attorneys. Here is a picture of a fornicating slut. Says the new Madonna and the selling of sex in America. And it talks about a book. It's a bestseller, I guess, going across our land. This comes just prior to the election. I noticed that none of the men campaigning, however, really talked about that particular book in relation to values. It's also interesting to me that of the three men that were of the forefront as far as understanding and knowledge of who was running, there were other men running, but of the three, Bush and Clinton and Perot, it would appear to me that perhaps Perot had more to say on values regarding fornication than the other two. In fact, in Newsweek, dated June 8, 1992, it has in the front of it, it says, whose values? And it has a section regarding values. I thought it was interesting that their section starts with whose family, who makes the choices concerning whose values. See the picture there? There's a picture of a WASP family, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant of the 50s. They're saying whose values. And the article is very clear that those values that we had then no longer exist. But I'm off the point. Let me read what Perot said. In this article on page 23 it says, quote, he'll uphold the ban on gays in the military. No homosexuals in the upper ranks of his administration. He will not knowingly hire an adulterer for any job. End quote. Talking about Perot's position concerning homosexuality and adultery. Isn't it interesting that in America, of those three men, he got the least votes? And we put a man in the White House who openly says that he wants homosexuals, these people that practice sexual perversion, in the military and in positions of government. Now there's America's values. That, along with Madonna selling sex. What is a person that sells sex normally called? Oh, what is it? Oh yeah, I think that's what it is, a whore. Of course, she wants to be considered as an artist. In fact, as we go in this message, you'll see that she considers herself more than an artist, but also a revolutionary. And she likes to be considered even as a missionary. We'll see that that makes sense as you begin to understand this message, which I've entitled Fornication. Death to America on the battleground of fornication. We don't normally think of this sex scene as anything more than an erotic playpen, when in reality you'll find that it's actually a battleground. And Americans are losing the battle. This isn't, by the way, just happening in America. I noticed in yesterday's Rocky Mountain News, it says here, sex swamps television in Australia. The Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, Scandinavian, and kindred people who are the Israel people of Scripture, who are repeating their history, didn't just settle in the North American continent. And it's interesting to note that wherever they're at, in Western Europe or in Australia, that they are following the same line, being swamped with this thing called sex. Let's Let's turn to Jeremiah chapter 5. Listen, America, verse 7 through 9. Why should I pardon you? Your sons have forsaken me, and sworn by those who are not gods. When I had fed them to the full, they committed adultery, and trooped to the harlot's house. They were well-fed, lusty horses, each one neighing after his neighbor's wife. Shall I not punish these people, declares the Lord, and on a nation such as this shall I not avenge myself? Keep your finger there, or mark it there. We're going to come back to a few more scriptures in Jeremiah chapter 5. But we see that God has promised you cannot sin and get by. Jeremiah was making a proclamation to a nation. And this same holds true for the nation. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever we sow, we will reap. And we can't understand why all of a sudden we're having a harder time economically. We can't understand why our health isn't like it used to be. We want some health insurance, don't we? Well, there's nothing you can be sure of except this. You cannot sin, America, and get by. The flaunting of sexual immorality is actually a battleground. It's a war. And the losers haven't even woke up to that reality yet. Remember the story of Pinocchio? Sometimes you find truth in different areas besides the Bible. And I think the story of Pinocchio certainly was a truthful story. Oh, they made Pleasure Island look so fun. Remember all the great lights and the gaiety, and everybody was being marched off the Pleasure Island. Remember the slick, sneaky wolf that was trying to get Pinocchio there, and Pinocchio went. But in the end, what was the end of Pleasure Island? In the end, they turned into jackasses and beasts of burden. And the same has happened to the dumb goyim cattle who have fallen for the sex trap that has been put forth by the Antichrist in our land. And now they're no longer dumb goyim cattle, they're dumb jackasses, laboring under the beasts as beasts of burden, paying more taxes. Mama and Daddy both have to work now, and that's still not enough. And things are not going well for them, and they can't figure out why. What do you think the prophets of old would be saying today to America? Repent. Just plain old-fashioned repentance. Turn back to God's laws. It's a battleground. In this article about Madonna selling sex, I want to read page 95 and 94, quote, "And from the looks of things, last Wednesday morning, sex measured up." That's the name of the book. Priced at $49.95 and packaged in a Mylar bag that warned adults only, the book sold 150,000 copies the first day out of 500,000 printed for American distribution. Who says we're in a recession, says Lawrence J. Kirschbaum, president of Warner Books, called it review proof. End of quote. Dropping on down in the article, it says, quoting Madonna, quote, "I see myself as a revolutionary at this point." End of quote. Now she's being honest. She sees herself as a revolutionary. You have revolutionaries when you have a war going on, do you not? Now I read another portion of the article. It says, quote, "In many ways, as Pat Buchanan asserted at the Republican convention in August, there really is a cultural war going on. Sex stood to claim the battlefield." In the quote. Here we see right before our eyes that we have a war, a cultural war, a battleground, and they're even bragging that they're winning. And what do you lose? What do you lose in this battle? Go back to Jeremiah 5, and let's read on. We read verse 7 and 9. Let's read verse 11 and 13. 11 through 13. Quote, "For the house of Israel and the house of Judah have dealt very treacherously with me, declares the Lord. Let me read that again. For the house of Israel and the house of Judah have dwelt very treacherously with me, declares the Lord. Let's stop there a second. Oh, we can see the treacherous dealings of our forefathers of old, can't we? But do we ever consider ourselves as treacherously dealing with God? Yet we'll take that very man, Clinton, who says that homosexuals are to be in the military and to be in the positions of government, and we'll parade him down Main Street in D.C. and have him step up on a platform and place his little pink paw on what? A Bible. Oh, we piously swear in our president with his hand on the Bible. A Bible that says homosexuality is wrong. A Bible that says homosexuality is a sin. A Bible that says homosexuality violates the laws of God. A Bible that says homosexuality is worthy of the death penalty. I didn't write the Bible. Don't get angry at me because I'm telling you what's in there. If you don't like it, go out and burn your Bibles. But don't put your president's hand on it and have him piously swear over it. That's dealing treacherously, is it not, Israel? Verse 12. They have lied about the Lord and said, not he, or footnote says, he is not. Misfortune will not come on us, and we will not see sword or famine. Let's stop there a second. After they deal treacherously with the Lord, then they lie about the Lord. What's the lie? God is love only. They always leave the only out, because it's self-explanatory. That's a lie. How many times has our God of the Scriptures said that I'm a God of wrath and I will repay, and you can't get by doing that? And then these people say, misfortune will not come on me. Well, right after they have the swearing-in ceremony, they don't say it this way, misfortune will not come upon me. What they say is, happy days are here again. Oh, happy days are here again. Isn't that what they do? And they say misfortune, sword, and famine. Now, famine is a biblical word that describes our word today called depression. Because when you're hungry, you get depressed. And they say, oh, it won't happen to us. It won't happen. And then it says in verse 13, and the prophets are as wind. Here we have these prophets going up and down the streets of Jerusalem, and a few of them still in America. It says, repent. They say, the prophets are as wind. How do we say it today? Oh, windbag up there. Lord, they shouldn't let him on the radio. Why don't somebody do something about that guy? Get him off the radio. And the word is not in them. Thus it will be done to them. In other words, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He ought to read his Bible. Is there anything new under the sun? Nothing new. I'm telling you, Jeremiah couldn't help himself but to preach on this subject sometime or another when you see that going on in the land. He just couldn't help it. Turn to Ephesians chapter 5. Here in this chapter, we see fornication being addressed. A couple points that Americans haven't quite figured out. We'll start with verse 5 and 6. It says, for this you know with certainty, that no immoral or impure person or covetous man who is an idolater has an inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Now here we see in this passage of Scripture that it's talking about a Greek word that means to sell, prostitute, debauchery, libertine, fornicator. The King James translation says whoremonger. The New American Standard translates the word immoral, but that's what it means, sexual immorality. And what do we see there? We see that in this passage of Scripture that we are not to let anyone deceive us concerning sexual immorality. Look at verse 3 again. Let no immorality or any impurity or greed even be named among you, as is proper among saints. And there must be no filthiness and silly talk or coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. For this you know with certainty, that no immoral, impure, or covetous man who is an idolater has an inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Now what did it say there? That no immoral person will go to heaven? It didn't say that. It's not even addressing heaven here. It's addressing the kingdom of heaven. And here it says, no immoral person shall inherit the kingdom. And what does that mean, the kingdom of heaven? The word kingdom means royal power, kingship, rule. You'll not have the rule of Christ and his government, if you want to think of it that way, if you're going to have fornication in your midst. In other words, it's telling us Americans, you want to form a government where there's economic security and there's a health plan and where there's prosperity and where there's 2 cars in every garage and all the things we come up with. You want actually the government of God that the Scriptures calls the kingdom of God. But do you not know that there are others that do not want you to have that? Others that know they have no right to that inheritance, that they cannot have it? Esau lost it a long time ago, and they say, if I can't have it, you don't have it. And one way to keep us from having it is to promote this thing of fornication. Here's something I want you to center in on. In verse 6, let no one deceive you with empty words. Because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. It says, let no one, the King James translation says, let no man deceive you. It doesn't say the devil. It says, let no man deceive you. Oh man, you mean to tell me like man, someone wants to deceive me, like to trick me? That's bogus, man, huh? Yeah, Wayne. The Scripture says that let no man deceive you, means that some man would want to deceive you, some men would want to deceive you concerning this thing. Hasn't anyone noticed how Hollywood, which is controlled by the Antichrist people, the people that do not have the inheritance, the descendants of Esau, how Hollywood has a lot of movies about sex, illicit sex, and adultery. Has anybody noticed that? Think about it. Here the Scripture says that someone that practices this is worthy of the wrath of God. But what are the examples that are given daily to our people? How about Tom Selleck of Magnum? How many times has he slept with some old gal? But he's the big stud hero. Or how about Sam on Cheers? Is he recognized as a whoremonger, as a disease spreader, or some kind of ladies' man, another stud hero? Or Fonzie on Happy Days? Always heroes, but yet the Bible says these men are villains. Why don't you ever see a film? Why don't you ever see a film where these womanizers, these men, who according to the Bible are actually villains, why don't we see them ever portrayed as villains? Who rob a woman of her one-time virginity, who rob a good, godly, moral man of the right to be able to have a woman for a wife that was a virgin. Why don't we ever see stories about how women get pregnant or are forced into an abortion, or how they're forced to have a child out of wedlock? And then we could even do a TV series, you know, Single Mama, we'll call it, and show her life, how hard it really is to try to put food on the table and try to give parental guidance to her child. Exhausted and tired. No, we've got something entirely different portrayed on TV than that. You know, at camp this last year, I had a woman who's a very brave, courageous Christian woman who, prior to becoming a Christian, committed fornication. She didn't kill her baby through abortion. She had it. She became a Christian. And I had her stand up before the young people's class there in a message I entitled The Sexy Snare. And she said, I'm not ashamed to stand here because Christ has died for me and washed me clean my sins. And I want to tell you what life is like as a single mother. When she got done telling what life is really like, I can guarantee you the young people were sober. Very sober. It's a very sobering life. How about a TV theme for Sam on Cheers, with old stud Sam being visited by an old flame, and he's standing behind the bar cleaning out one of his drinking glasses and saying, "Oh, hey guys, here's one of my old flames," and she comes up to him holding a little child, informs Sam that it's her and his child, but it's blind because of the BD that Sam gave her. Oh, that'd be a good one, wouldn't it, for Cheers? Do you ever see these deceivers from Hollywood presenting that to us? No. Why? Because they're liars. They're of their father, the devil. They are deceiving us, and we're a bunch of blind, dumb, glum jackasses, and we take all of it that they give us, don't we? And then we damn the creature to hell that has enough guts to get on the radio and tell the world about it. You better repent, America. I got news for you. God didn't die in the 60s like they deceived you. He's well and alive, and he's mad as hell. I know. How about this one for a theme? Something, maybe I could become a TV writer, called a series, Those Ticklish Teenage Tangles. Can you hear it advertised on television? Ladies and gentlemen, be sure to tune in for next week's episode as the boys go to Tijuana on those ticklish teenage tangles. Another funny, adventurous, frolic film of Tom, Dick, and Harry as they discover manhood on spring break in Tijuana. A hilarious spoof of syphilis and clap and gonorrhea that they bring home to their steady girls. Oh, you'll laugh yourself silly as Barbie tries to break the news to her prudish Christian parents that she has a new strain of venereal disease. And guess who Harry's girlfriend Sue runs into on her way to the abortion clinic? Her picketing Christian mother. What will Susie say now? Tune in next Sunday night for those ticklish teenage tangles, something for everyone in the family. And you know something, America? You'll tune in like a bunch of fornicating whoremongers who have turned your back on your God. You know perfectly well what ought to be done with those men that would present that to our people. Are there any men left out there? Why, after a half a century of sex on the screen, have we not been shown the dark side? The tragedies and the tears, the ruined lives and the broken hearts, the suicides and the depressions and the destroyed marriages and the disasters. Why haven't we seen just one series on that subject? I'll tell you why. Because someone has worked hard to deceive us, America. Someone who knows that only the pure in heart shall see God. That only the pure in heart shall see. Someone who knows that only the pure in heart shall inherit the kingdom. Why would someone want to deceive us? There's an answer to that. We're going to discuss that in the second half of this message, as well as discuss something that I think is even more odious and despicable than the scene of the slut fornicator Madonna wiggling her naked butt down the highway. How about a preacher who stands behind the pulpits of our land today who will not say anything about this? Which is worse? I'd rather see Madonna's butt with the full frontal view of a preacher with his robes and the garb and a cross around his neck, not saying a word. And why doesn't he say a word? It has to do with this battleground and this religion that Madonna's promoting. Why would someone want to deceive us in America? Well, let's go to Numbers chapter 25. In Numbers 25, we see history of our people. Some people say, what difference does the Christian Israel identity message makes? Well, if you don't know who you are, you don't know what your people have done. And you can't really understand where you're at in history, and consequently you can't learn from history, can you? But this is a historical happening. It took place a long time ago. Let's start with verse 1. While Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. For they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel. Now, keep your finger there, or in the proximity, maybe you want to mark it. Let's go back to Ephesians and review again what we've already read. In Ephesians chapter 5. In verse 6 it says, "Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience." Notice that it says the wrath of God comes on the sons of disobedience. What disobedience? Look at the context. Disobeying God's values or his moral laws concerning this subject of sexual fornication. Now we go back to Numbers 25, verse 3. It says, "So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel." It has always worked the same. The wrath of God came upon these people who bowed themselves or joined themselves to Baal of Peor. Note here that it talks about Baal of Peor, but it doesn't really tell what the whole story is. Now, to get the story, we've got to go to some other books. Before I go there, though, well, let's go to the other story here. In the book of Jasher, now this is not something I consider inspired, but it's a fascinating book because it fills in a lot of gaps that you find in the book of Genesis. And in the book of Jasher, it gives us some details about what took place there in Numbers chapter 25. I want to read a portion of it to you. Actually, as we read from the book of Jasher and later from Josephus in the Antiquity of the Jews, we find that it was a plot. It was a strategic remover. It was a strategic move on the parts of their opponents who were at war with them to bring Israel low. Now here's the story from the book of Jasher. It says, "And the children of Moab were afraid of the children of Israel. And the children of Moab took all their daughters and their wives of beautiful aspect and comely appearance, and dressed them in gold and silver and costly garments. And the children of Moab seated those women at the door of their tents, in order that the children of Israel might see them and turn to them, and not fight against Moab. Thus did the children of Moab to Israel in that place, in the plain of Shittim, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel on account of this matter. And he set a pestilence among them, and there died of the Israelites 24,000 men." So here from the book of Jasher, we get a little clearer picture of what happened. It was a plot. Men trying to deceive Israel. And so they took the most beautiful women they had, and they decked them out, tore off a sleeve here, shortened up the skirt, dropped the blouse line, what all you do, perfumed them up, played the song, "Come a little bit closer, you're my man." The music was there in the air, the perfume, everything was just right. And you'll find that the men of Israel were taken in. They know how to appeal to the lust of the flesh. Today we don't have the tents and the tambourines and that. What do we have? We have the lighting. Okay, Madonna, get in this position. Okay, men, get the lights on her a little bit. Her breasts, got a shadow there. Take that away, you know. And then they get all the settings that they can. Background music. And they do it through the technology of film. But it's the same thing. In this story, or in this article, in Newsweek, November 2nd, 1992, I want to read something here. It says, "But while the book sold like crazy, it sparked little of the anticipated outrage. Even the professionally offended couldn't lure camera crews up to the mountaintop whence to hurl thunderbolts at Madonna." Now there's two things here. It says that there was very little anticipated outrage, and they couldn't lure the camera crews up, those that were outraged. Why? Because the people that control the camera crews today, those that control our media today, They'll decide what gets aired and what doesn't. Dropping on down here, it says in the book, but while the book sold like crazy, it sparked little anticipated outrage. A Mr. David Elkine, professor of child development at Tufts University and author of The Hurried Child, is quoted in this magazine as saying, quote, "They," referring to children, "wonder, why am I being allowed to see this? Why isn't anyone saying kids don't need this stuff? Why isn't anyone looking out for my interest?" End of quote. I thought that was a worthy quote to mention. They're wondering why. And I wonder, where are the preachers? Where are the churches in our land today? They aren't paid to speak out on things like this. They're paid to tell you how much Jesus loves you, how you can be healthy and prosperous and wise with Jesus. They aren't paid to tell you this, or maybe I should put it this way. They are paid not to speak out. This brings us to something in this story of Numbers 25 that relates to the men today behind the pulpits and the Baal of Peor. The men behind our pulpits today are Baal priests. Now, Balaam, as far as I can see in Scripture, is one of the first notable Baal priests. And we read about Balaam in the New Testament. Turn over to 2 Peter. 2 Peter chapter 2. Now we're going to find out the rest of the story about Numbers chapter 25, as Paul Harvey would say it, in a moment. But let's read about Balaam. He was an ancient religious leader, a religious priest. And it says in 2 Peter, starting with verse 12, "But these, like unreasoning animals, born as creatures of instinct to be captured and killed, revel where they have no knowledge, will in the destruction of those creatures also be destroyed. Suffering wrong as the wages of doing wrong, they count it a pleasure to revel in the daytime. They are stains and blemishes, reveling in their deceptions as they carouse with you." Let's stop there a second. Verse 13. Notice it says that there are certain men that revel in their deception. It's hard for you to accept it, but the truth is, some men really revel in deceiving other men. Verse 14. "Having eyes full of adultery, and that never cease from sin, enticing unstable souls, having a heart trained in greed, accursed children. Forsaking the right way, they have gone astray, having followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness." Now, there we see that Balaam is condemned as having loved the wages of unrighteousness. But really, when you go back in the Old Testament, there in Numbers, and read about Balaam, you don't find exactly what it was that he did. At least I couldn't see it. You've got to go beyond the Scriptures into some historical accounts to find out the true story. Turn over also to the book of Jude, chapter 1, or verse 11, I should say, of the only chapter. It says, "Woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and for pay they have rushed headlong into the error of Balaam, and perished in the rebellion of Korah." Now, the rebellion of Korah was where they were rebelling against Moses. Today we have that rebellion in our land. They rebel in the churches against the law of God. But we see that in this verse that they rush headlong into the error of Balaam, and they do it for pay. Now, this is the rest of the story. You find it in Josephus. It's called The Work of the Jews by Josephus. Very ancient writing. And I'm going to read to you a portion of that story as Josephus gives the account. Now, in the Scriptures, the Bible tells us that Balaam was hired to curse Israel, but he could never get the job done. But we see in the book of Josephus, the writings of Josephus, that he did do something, and he did it for pay. Here's the story. It says, "He sent for Balak," talking about Balaam, "and for the princes of the Midianites, and spake thus to them, O Balak and you Midianites that are here present, I am obliged, even without the will of God, to gratify you. Let's stop there a second. What we read in Josephus is he says, it's not the will of God, but I'm going to do it anyway. Why do you suppose he's going to do it anyway? Money. They offered him great money. He says, it is true, no entire destruction can seize upon the nation of the Hebrews, neither by war, nor by plague, nor by scarcity of the fruits of the earth, nor can any other unaccepted accident be to their entire ruin. For the providence of God is concerned to preserve them from such a misfortune, nor will it permit any such calamity to come upon them whereby they may all perish. Let's stop there a second. What he's saying is, you're not going to wipe them out by these things. It's not that they can't be victims of the plague, of famine and so forth, but you can't wipe them out, is what he's saying. And by the way, isn't it interesting that in Numbers 24, when they started their sexual fornication, that a plague came upon them? We keep hearing about a plague today, don't we? They call it AIDS. It says, going on in this story, but some small misfortune, and those for some time, whereby they may appear to be brought low, may still befall them. But after that they will flourish again, to the terror of those who brought these mischiefs upon them. So Balaam said, you can bring some misfortune upon them and bring them low. When they come back up, the guys that did it are going to pay. Amen. Going on, so that if you are desirous of gaining a victory over them for a short space of time, you will obtain it by following my directions. Do you therefore set out the comeliness of such of your daughters as are most eminent for beauty, and proper to conquer the modesty of those that behold them, and these deck and ornament to the highest degree you are able. Then send them to the Israelites' camp, and give them in charge, that when the young men of the Hebrews desire the company, they allow it them, till they have persuaded them to neglect their own laws, and the worship of that God who established them, and to worship the gods of the Midianites and the Moabites, for by this means God will be incensed against them. And what we see from this story is that Balaam said, and he did it for pay, you pay me, I'm going to tell you what you can do. You can turn the Hebrew God against them and bring his wrath upon them by having them follow your gods, which was the god of what? The god of lust, sexual fornication, immorality. It says, now the young men were induced by the fondness they had for these women. So they gave themselves up to what they suggested and transgressed their own laws. And it goes on talking about how they rebelled against Moses, transgressed against the law, just as our people today who have a law in their heart know that it's wrong to have some fornicating slut like Madonna being sold in the regular bookstores, being broadcasted on the airways in front of our children and so forth. We have a law and we know it's wrong. But they went against that law. And why did they go against it? Because there was a priest for pay that allowed it. And the ministers today behind the pulpits that say nothing about this, why don't they? Because they're not paid to. The churches that they pastor do not want to turn anybody away or offend anyone because that hurts the offering plate. Are they not serving Balaam, keeping shut their mouths, allowing this error to go on for wages of unrighteousness? And so our people serve the god of Peor. It's another god. In the magazine, Madonna is in an interview. And in the interview it says, let's see if I can find it here. Madonna, do you see yourself as some kind of sexual missionary? Her response, I suppose that's one way to look at it. In other words, she's not denying it. Well, what religion is she a missionary for? The worship of Baal, which was the religion of the Canaanites. In Haley's Bible Handbook, under the section titled Religion of the Canaanites, it says Baal was their principal god. Priestess were temple prostitutes. Sodomites were male temple prostitutes. The worship of Baal and other Canaanite gods consisted in the most extravagant orgies. Their temples were centers of vice. Not only is this a war, it's a war about whose God is going to prevail, but it's also the promoting of a religion. Here is an article I cut out of a paper a long time back. It says, How Women Get Ordained in Church of Sex and Money. Takes 1,000 lovers. See this little Jewess here, her husband? The article says, the high priestess of a religious cult had sex with more than 2,600 men to absolve them of their sins for $100 contributions. Her husband says she was doing God's work. Now we laugh at that and we say it's absurd, but it's absurd for us not to recognize that the God of the Bible is not the only God that people want to acknowledge. The Canaanites do not acknowledge him. Why? Because he has described them as a cursed people. They don't have the inheritance he offers to God's people, the kingdom of heaven. And so as a result, they choose to follow Baal. And when they can cause us to do the same, what happens to us? We turn into beasts of burden. Things are hard for Israel today. They're not healthy like they once were. The little family that we've seen in here, the Wasp family. Look at them again. Where it says whose values, who makes the choices. 2 little tow-headed children. Husband, wife, looks like Ozzie and Harriet. Where one wage earner could support the family. Those days don't exist anymore, do they? Why? Because we've been deceived and the wrath of God's been turned upon us. There's only one answer. It's repentance. Repentance is not just us turning back to the laws of God. It's running every stinking Canaanite out of this country. I long for the day that Madonna's little naked body can be chained to a stake and God's people can stone her. And anyone else who would bring in such a filthy, vile religion into our land, and that's what it is. Anyone else that would wage war with us and try to exalt their God over ours. This is a battle. It's a battlefield, not an exotic playpen of sex. They've used the same tactic that's been used on us before. And there's a lot of preachers that are going to answer too to why they didn't say anything about this kind of stuff in our land. They took the wages of unrighteousness. I'll conclude with this example that we put in our booklet regarding the environment. But it says, this comes from the Biblical Institute, the Institute of Biblical Law, I should say, on page 367, talking about a Professor Unwin. It says, quote, Unwin began his research determined to dispel the idea that any necessary connection existed between the level of civilization and its sexual morality. He found instead that if we know the sexual regulations and conduct of a society, we can accurately prophesy, and the word is his, prophesy, the pattern of its cultural behavior. Mental development and cultural advance go hand in hand with the development of strict monogamy and premarital and postmarital chastity. The society with premarital and postmarital license is at a dead level culturally and mentally. It progresses to the degree that its sexual regulations move towards a strict monogamy. In 3 generations, the impact of a new morality is fully felt. As a result, Unwin felt the strict rules of chastity and continence cannot be unnatural since they are productive of the best in nature. Isn't it interesting? He said 3 generations. And the sins of the fathers visit the 2nd, the 3rd, 4th generations. But what happens then? Repentance. Because we either repent or we perish. Let's stand. Our Father in heaven, I ask for your blessings on this message as it goes out on the airways. I ask that your blessings would be granted to it, that you would direct the message to people who need to hear, those that you call, that wherever they might be, that they turn on the radio or wherever they're traveling, I pray, Father, that you would direct the message and let it not come back unfruitful, but fruitful. Father, we yearn and we long for that repentance to come to our land. Have it be. I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Blessing number one was when you died for me. I never knew the love you gave that day. And blessings number two was when you came alive again. You came back but never meant to stay. Now I've got blessings by the numbers, treasures by the score. Every day you're blessing me, each day I love you more. Yes, I've got blessings by the numbers, a love that makes me win. And the day that I stop counting, that's the day my world will end. Blessings number three was when you called me and said that you were coming back to stay. With hopeful hearts I waited for your knock on the door. I've waited and you haven't lost your way. Now I've got blessings by the numbers, treasures by the score. Every day you're blessing me, each day I love you more. Yes, I've got blessings by the numbers, a love that makes me win. And the day that I stop counting, that's the day my world will end. Now I've got blessings by the numbers, treasures by the score. Every day you're blessing me, each day I love you more. Yes, I've got blessings by the numbers, a love that makes me win. And the day that I stop counting, that's the day my world will end.
Whoa. So everybody's going to sing out plenty loud.
Read His Word, heed His signs. Can't you see these are the times? Earthquakes, famine, and pestilence are all on the rise. The love of man is waxing cold, just the way that He foretold. With all these things now happening before our eyes. Can't you feel the kingdom coming? Can't you sense a new day dawning? Rising like the morning sun, with healing in His wings. Make up your mind to be believing.
Lightning bolts from east to west. So shall